Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new League of Legends video. So with patch 6.9 and the mid-season update live for a few days now, I'm sure a lot of you have had the chance to play around with the new mage reworks, the new mage items, and the updated mage items as well. And honestly, it's a lot of fun, and this is definitely one of the best patches Riot has released in a long time. But at the same time, this is also a very big patch. There's a lot of information to take in, and whether or not you are mid lane main or you just happen to just try out the new mages in the mid lane, well, chances are you have been somewhat confused as to which items are probably the best to get on the mage that you're playing. Well, this is hopefully where this video comes in. Now remember guys, this is going to be just to give you a rough, hopefully decent enough idea as to what items you should get. I have created 9 different groups that help distinguish the type of mage that you're playing to give you a good idea as to what items you want to be looking at. So I really do hope that this video will help you in that regard. But either way guys, right before we jump into the actual builds and give you an idea on what to get on what mage, the question of this video is, what do you think of my new outro that is at the end of this video? I think it's absolutely fantastic, and big shoutouts to the Dark Tongo for making it. So please make sure to check it out and let me know. And if you end up enjoying this video and find it helpful, then definitely hit that like button to let me know. Alright guys, so let's start talking about all the different builds and the different items to get based on the champion you're playing. So the first one we'll be talking about is as follows. Are you a mage that is fairly long range or fairly safe, or is even mobile, who also has good damage and doesn't really have to worry about getting hard dove, whether it's by some kind of assassin or some fighter in the top lane? So for instance, are you someone like Ahri, Xerath, Ziggs, Syndra, Orianna, Veigar, and you're not facing someone like Zed or Talon in the mid lane? Then I highly recommend you get something along the lines of a Morellonomicon, Rabadon's Void Staff, Luden's Echo, Abyssal Scepter, and a Rylai's Crystal Scepter. Not in that particular order, but you should start with a Morellonomicon. But if you are facing someone like Zed or maybe even Talon in the mid lane, just throw in a Zhonya's Hourglass somewhere in this build. Now again, this does kind of matter on which champion are you playing. I mean, are you playing Veigar? Well, chances are you might want to skip the Rylai's. And same thing goes for someone like a Syndra, but if you're playing maybe even Ziggs or Ahri, then the Rylai's could actually be surprisingly quite good. Essentially, the point of this build is to go more or less glass cannon. You just want to go flat out hard damage and just annihilate your opponents. Now, one thing you'll notice is that I do not include boots in any of these builds. The reason for that is because it just really comes down to what you're actually getting. I mean, do you have enough CDR? Then you want to skip the Lucidity boots and you want to go maybe for boots of swiftness or even Sork boots. The goal you want to keep in mind with these builds and your runes is to try at least hit 30% CDR without the blue buff. A lot of the new AP items give you a lot of CDR now, so hitting 30% shouldn't be all that difficult whether or not you take into account your runes and or Lucidity boots. But next, let's jump into build number 2. Now this one is applying to mages that are immobile, not very long range on their abilities, but still have fairly good damage in their kit overall, but they might get dove really hard, whether it's by someone like a Zed, by someone like a Talon, or some fighter in the top lane. You need some defensive stats. So for instance, champions maybe like Annie, Aurelion Sol, Malzahar, Anivia, Swain, etc. All of these champions in a team fight are fairly immobile. None of them really have some form of dashing type ability. Yet they still have some decent range on their abilities, and they also have very good damage on top of also if they try to get dove really hard by the enemy, well, you can easily survive it. So the item build I recommend for these kind of champions for that kind of scenario is a Rod of Ages, Hextech GLP, the Ice one, Abyssal Scepter, Rylai's, Zhonya's, Rabadon's, and Void Staff. You'll notice that all of these are tanky AP items. They all give offensive stats but also offer some very nice defensive stats. But if you're playing either Cassiopeia or Ryze, just throw in an Archangel Staff somewhere near the beginning, maybe before or after the Rod of Ages, and other than that, follow the rest of the build based on what you need for the game. But let's not waste any time and go straight to build number 3. So this build path is essentially made for mages who are fairly immobile but also have a very strong initiation burst or catch combo potential and don't really need a lot of tankiness because of the enemy team comp. Or you just want to go mainly damage because that's just how you want to play it. So this can apply to champions such as Annie, Brand, Twisted Fate, Lux, Veigar, and so on. All of these mages also are very immobile. None of them have a dashing type ability that can use in a team fight. Yet at the same time, most of these have some really good burst damage and all of them have a lot of catch potential. So this is going to be the first build that utilizes the new Hextech Rocket Belt. Because not only will it help their immobility, maybe to escape a scenario by giving them also a little bit of HP, but you can use it to dash forward and catch someone off without them expecting it. But the other items included in this build are a Morellonomicon, Luden's Echo, Rabadon's Void Staff Abyssal, Rylai. Essentially you're trying to go just full damage type items unless you're playing someone like Annie or Brand where Rylai's is actually very strong. Next up for build number 4 is going to be somewhat similar in terms of the idea as to build number 3, but this one is going to be for champions that also need some extra tankiness. This build can apply to champions mentioned in the previous build that I just talked about, so for example maybe Twisted Fate, Annie, Anivia, Rise, etc. And the items you want to look for when playing these kind of champions with this kind of scenario are Rod of Ages, Hextech Rocket Belt, Abyssal, Rylai, Zhonya's, Rabadon's Void Staff, and if you're playing Rise or Cassiopeia, Archangel Staff. Again, the idea is to still make use of the Rocket Belt to dash forward, maybe to catch people off, but also giving you some much needed tankiness because, well, you simply need it if you're going for this build path based on maybe the champion you're playing like Anivia, or maybe the enemy team's champions. Moving along to build number 5, this one is going to be focusing on a support type mage in the mid lane, one that protects allies while also being able to deal decent damage. But when I say support, I mean champions that have either a heal or a shield type ability within their kits, which of course can easily refer to champions like Lulu, Karma, or even someone like Janna in the mid lane, or just supports in general in the support lane. All of these champions are more or less a supporty type champion, but they can also dish out some serious damage. But as I'm sure you can already guess, the idea behind these ones and this build is to make use of the new Athenes, the one that heals whenever you heal or shield an ally. But following the Athenes, some other items you can definitely look to get are Rabadon's, Hextech GLP, the Ice one, Abyssal, Void Staff, Zhonya's, and things like that. Alright, next let's move on to some control-oriented type mages. So build number 6 is for a control mage that has good CEC that wants something to just complement their kit that doesn't also require a lot of tankiness or even mana. So champions that can fit under this category are ones such as Lux, Anivia, Zyra, or Yana. All of these champions essentially control the battlefield with their high AoE CC type abilities. So you want to get something like Morello's because it gives a lot of AP damage and it gives them the mana reset essentially whenever they get a kill or assist, which for a champion like this that has shields and very easy way to get damage to get assists will happen quite often. The Hextech GLP is quite nice here because it does give you more control from the item, and following that something like Abyssal, Rabadon's, Void Staff, Rylai's, especially Rylai's, and Zhonya's can be very good. Alright, but what if you're playing a control-oriented type mage that kind of has to be in the middle of the fight for the most part, but they also have to be really tanky, but they still want to have and maintain that control-oriented playstyle. So for instance, maybe someone like a Morgana, someone like a Anivia, and again, Orianna and Karma. Again guys, don't forget the intent of this video is just to give you several different build options, again, based on certain scenarios, champions you play, and maybe even your personal playstyle. One champion can fit several of these builds, and some of these builds are very similar to others with slight differences here and there because the overall playstyle and the mindset behind the build is different. But either way, this build will be going the Morellonomicon and Rod of Ages build path followed by the Hextech GLP, again for nice damage and tankiness with the Abyssal, with the Rabadons, potentially with the Void Staff, Rylai's, Zhonya's. Just depends on how tanky you need to be and how much maybe you can afford to go a little bit of extra damage like a Rabadon's. And now moving on to the second last build I'll be talking about, build number 8. This one is for mages that like to spam their spells, somewhat of a mid-range type mage as well, or even in your face. So for instance, this one will be including champions like Karthus, Rise, and Cassiopeia. This one should be somewhat self-explanatory. I mean, you go Archangel Staff, Abyssal, Rylai's, Rabadon's, Hextech, Rocket Belt, because again, these champions are ones that want to be more or less in your face. They're very aggressive. And if you really want to, you can definitely throw in a Rod of Ages at the beginning, because it not only synergizes well with Archangel Staff, but it helps these champions be in your face that much better. Void Staff and Zhonya's Hourglass. Now those are the items I recommend you choose from. And now the final build I'll be talking about, build number 9. This one is specifically for just one champion, Vladimir. He does require a little bit of a unique type of build, but it can definitely look something like this. You get the Hex Deck, Rocket Belt, you get the Spirit Visage, Rylai's Abyssal, Void Staff, Death Cap. These are the items that work well on Vladimir, and essentially anything that can give you HP that doesn't also give you mana, so Rod of Ages doesn't really work out that well. But that is about it for this video, guys. I mean, if you did enjoy it, definitely hit that like button. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about the video, and also let me know what you think about my outro coming up in just a few seconds. Very quickly, here are my favorite comments from the previous video's question asking, do you think Zed needs a rework? But either way, I thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you for the next video. Peace.